It's Halloween, and I did want to cover something particularly spooky, but then I remembered that I don't actually have any particularly spooky figures. But then I remembered that Legacy Evolution Nova Prime exists. And I suppose you could call him spooky for a plethora of reasons. The character's kind of undead, he's linked to like this dark, dead universe. The price on the aftermarket, that's pretty scary. But largely, I'll be perfectly honest, I just wanted to cover this figure, and the DNA Design DK51 kit. So I suppose, without really beating around the bush too much more, let's take a look at him. And with the sheer amount that this figure does, I'm going to be splitting this video kind of into two parts. So we're just going to get into Nova himself right now, and if it's all you're here for, then here's the timestamp for the DNA kit. Anyway, the sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are pretty great. There is a lot of extremely good detail all over this guy, thanks to him being a retool of Siege Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime, which I don't have and have never handled, but I have handled a retool of the figure that's retooled from... I've had Kingdom Magnus. This isn't my first rodeo with this mold. And I can't lie, for the IDW Nova Prime design, this is a great fit. The armored mode has a real presence. I will say though that there is a little bit of a disparity between the older parts of the figure and the new retooled ones. The chest plate, the head, the shoulders, the wings, they are a little less detailed than just the entirety of the rest of them. But I kind of don't mind that look. It does seem to amalgamate into a very nice design overall. And those new features are probably the highlights of the figure for me, especially those wings. They just give him such a distinct and imposing silhouette. Now, proportionately, as you can see, this guy isn't quite perfect. The limbs are in pretty good proportion with one another, and he looks really great from the front, but he is very deep. Just due to the nature of the armor feature, he does have quite a lot of bulk on him, but compared to the other version of this mold that I've handled, this is a lot less obtrusive. And it does kind of work its way into the design. He does look really big and hulking. I don't mind it too much. Although the stock hands are a little bit out of proportion. They're a tiny bit small. These are the ones from the DNA kit, by the way. I just didn't really want to take the arms apart to take them off, only for the footage. Sue me. Overall, I just think the sculpt of this guy is pretty great, and the colors really make it pop. All of that stark white and the various different shades of metallics, the gold, the gunmetal, the blue, they just look really great. I love this color scheme. And all the paint is applied really cleanly. This is just a really good looking figure for what it is. There are a couple of little problems. When you have the cannons up on the back, you can very clearly see just how hollow they are. Of course, there are those proportional issues, which I don't mind, but I'd understand if you did. But largely, I just really like the look. And he's very fun to mess with too. Accessory-wise, unless you count the entire armor gimmick, which I'm kinda not going to, he just comes with these two blasters, which aren't great. They're a little hollow. They look a little bit strange in his hands, doubly so when you get him down into the smaller mode. But I find if you plug them on the legs, they do nicely to fill them out and give him a little bit of kind of negative space. Bounces out the gunmetal. More of a feature than an accessory, but you can swing the two big blasters underneath his arms. The pegs are on sliding rails so they can move around in his hands, and you can pose them just a little bit. I really like this feature. It is one directly off of Galaxy Upgrade Prime, but it is welcome here. Just means you can do that a little bit more with him. I suppose you can take the extension off the end of one of them and give it to the figure, but once again, that doesn't look too great. He's not really the strongest in the accessories category, but everything he has is usable to some capacity. But the point at which I really start enjoying this guy is in the posing, because he might not be the best in the world, but for something this chunky, this is quite impressive. The head is on a fairly decent ball joint with a good amount of wiggle room. The shoulders can move out pretty standardly, and they can go up and down, but not quite all the way around because of the backpack. There's bicep swivels, standard elbows, wrist swivels. There's a waist swivel. The hips can move out pretty standardly and go forward and back on a pretty nice ratchet joint. There's thigh swivels, standard knees, and pretty good ankle pivots. I don't know if I'm just misremembering my time with Kingdom Magnus, but I didn't remember this guy posing quite this well. Aside from a couple of backpack clashes, there aren't really all that many poses that this guy struggles to get into. The only real limiting factor I find this guy has are the already angled feet, but they're not that big of a deal, and these massive heel spurs that I always forget are there kind of help with the stability. And he is nice and solid, so he can hold just about every pose you can get him into. I can't lie, the figure isn't the most dynamic I've ever seen, largely due to the short thighs, but still, posing this guy's pretty fun. Although his posing does free up a little bit more when you take off the armor. But I gotta admit, this ain't the best look. All of the details carried over here really nicely. There's some new stuff on the shins that looks really great, but the proportions are really thrown off by how small the head and shoulders are, which yes, they've got to be that way so they can actually fit the armor around them, but it does take away from the look a little bit. Now, I will say that the big old DNA hands aren't really helping this mode to any capacity. He does look decidedly more proportionate with the stock ones, but I think it's the white that's kind of throwing this whole thing off. The original Galaxy Upgrade Prime core robot, which gave this thing its really really cool chestplate, I will give it that. The original Siege Magnus Corebot, Shattered Glass Magnus, they all had one thing in common. They had a slightly darker color that kind of muted how wide the chest was. This one is so vibrant and in your face that you can't really ignore just how disproportionate that is, and it seems to throw all of the rest of it out of whack. Once again, I completely understand why the proportions are this way, just because of the armor feature. This is a secondary mode. That's why I've covered it second. But it doesn't stop it from looking a little subpar. But at least, as previously mentioned, it's just as functional. He can still use all of the accessories, the posing is about the same, if a little less restricted, that head is fantastic. And all in all, while this mode isn't exactly the most fun to look at, it is enjoyable to mess with. At the very least, until the transformation, just because there isn't really a whole lot going on here. At least in terms of the base robot mode. Because you're just tucking things away at the back, and that sliding rail to bring the chest forward does not feel the best. Hell, it's barely an alt mode until you bring in the wrist armor and complete the front end. And even then, this is a little rough on its own. There's no new details really exposed here, there's weird kibble, but at the very least it can roll. Yeah, this thing only really comes together when you get the armor on it, and I do really like the way that it all clips on. It's very nice and self-contained, and it kind of clips together in this big clump on the back, which then pegs on like a trailer. And once you got all that done, you are left with a pretty neat alt mode, but it doesn't quite feel right for Nova Prime. In the comics, as far as I know, he is a big truck, and that's exactly what this is, but this is so distinctly Cybertron Optimus Prime's alt mode. That incredibly nicely detailed but very distinct cab, those two long blasters running along the top. It just doesn't seem right for the character to me, but for what it is very good. You know, considering the amount of parts that clip together for this mode, it's really solid. The front wheels don't roll fantastically, but with the back and middle ones, it does roll pretty well. There's even a couple of ports where you can plug on the accessories. This is fun. It's just really putting into perspective where the limitations of the retooling from Galaxy Upgrade Prime come in. In the robot mode, it all fit. The armor up gimmick, the proportions, the wings. Maybe not the big blasters, but they're a fun addition. But the alt mode kinda puts questions down, like, should this guy have had an all-new mold? Should he maybe have been bumped up to a Commander release? And while I can't definitively answer either of those questions, I can think of one way to make this guy a hell of a lot better. The DNA Design DK51 upgrade kit takes this thing from a fine retool to a really good figure. To the point where since I put this thing on, this thing has been the centerpiece of my feature shelf. Not only do the differing detail levels mesh so much better now, thanks to the intermediate parts like the knee spikes and the feet, but he gains so much presence from those wings. These things bring in such a cool aesthetic, suddenly he feels more like a satellite than a character. This one detail just makes him feel like a cosmic entity, and that is exactly how I see this guy. And not just the look, but the quality of the kit is fantastic too. The plastics feel nice and durable, the sculpting is really crisp, the color matching is borderline perfect, it's so impressive. I feel like the most minor detail that really improves this guy are those two gap fillers for the blasters. Suddenly you're not looking straight at these hollow voids, and instead they feel like these towers. I really appreciate the look of this kit, and it's pretty functional as well. The posing isn't really restricted at all. The new hip skirts can fold forward and back so they can accommodate for the leg movement. The wings are on this really good connection of double hinges and swivels so they can move in pretty much any direction you want them to. And those new hands have individually articulated fingers, which just opens this guy up to so many more expressive movements. He even comes with a handful more accessories. There's this pair of blasters, which I've got to admit I don't love. They feel a little out of place in this guy's hands, and the undersides are very hollow. But I suppose they do look pretty good, and you can give them to other figures. The much more impressive accessory is this Star Saber. This is huge, and it's really nicely detailed. I'm not sure I like the details on it quite as much as the Age of the Primes one, but if you want one that scales with larger figures, then this is a very good option for you. and it looks really good in Nova's hands. Or, there is this piece that slots into the back that you can plug it onto, although this is the only part of the kit that really bothers me. This piece doesn't tab in at all, it just friction fits into the back, which does feel a little precarious to me. I do have concerns about the plastic warping over time, so just be wary of that. Especially since you do want to leave it in the figure because it is necessary for the alt mode, which, let's take a look at that now. Now the transformation itself remains largely the same, you're just using a couple of the tabs from it, plugging in the crotch on the back, and then bringing in the new knees, the feet, and that aforementioned section to create this new front for the truck. All of that requires parts forming. The only part that doesn't are the wings. You can leave these on all the way through, but I just removed them for the sake of simplicity. And it does take a little bit of lining up to get everything tabbed together, but once you have it done, it is nice and secure. You're not going to have parts falling off. And this new alt mode is exactly what I wanted out of this kit. It's so different from how it was. Not only with the wings completely changing the primary color of the mode, but that front portion completely changes the shape. It becomes so distinctive while retaining a lot of the details, and I really appreciate that. Now there are a couple of sacrifices. With all these new parts on, it doesn't roll quite as well, and if you don't plug everything in perfectly, the front half does fall apart occasionally, but if you have a little bit of patience and you tab everything together as it should be, it works a treat. And all in all, the DNA kit is a worthwhile pickup if you can get it for retail price, but the aftermarket price for it might be a little bit steep. And that's more or less the same, I'd say, with Nova. Now both the figure and the kit have had a recent reissue, which is exactly what I've got here, so if you can find stock, then I'd say go for it, but the retail price is about as far as I'd push with this guy. Because yeah, there are a couple of little issues with this guy, but I would still say that the good far outweighs the bad. And if you agree, then please leave a like. If you disagree, then leave a comment, tell me what you think of this figure. And be sure to subscribe for the next one. Now that Age of the Primes Wave 3 has finally come in, we're going to be finishing up Superion, but first, keep an eye out for midweek. I've got a little extra something lined up. Or if you're feeling a little impatient, then my Patreon's there, where you get early access, photo galleries, your name in the credits, the whole works. It's always an option. Right now though, I'm gonna go mess with the new Alpha Triumph, because I'm really enjoying that thing. Anyway, ciao.